damages and the material damages that is termed generational wealth. A lot of black activists like to throw this word around, and the narrative goes as follows. We need reparations in order to repair the psychological damages and the material damages that are the effects of the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. And I've looked into this myself, and what I found, once people like Booker T. Washington came into the mix, along with the Tuskegee Machine, the Negro Business League, and other such organizations, you had this kind of trend of excellence, of entrepreneurship. And a lot of black people were well on their way, establishing themselves, building neighborhoods, building suburban neighborhoods where they had nice, well-manicured lawns and painted houses and all the rest of it. They were engaging in commerce within their own communities. They weren't seeking for someone else to take care of them. And so you did have this generational wealth that was being built. Once the 70s came around, we began to be attracted by the rhetoric of people like Huey P. Newton, H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael, who later changed his name to Kwame Ture.
Our parents were very negative about the Black Panthers. And so whenever you mentioned it in my house, my mother would go loopy.
We began to embrace this kind of say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud kind of mentality that rejected the traditional way of setting yourself up.
I decided that I wanted to go the route of the Black Panther. I decided that they had a good program.
We began to be attracted and intrigued by this kind of Marxist rhetoric that rejected private ownership of property, that rejected quote unquote capitalism, that rejected Western ideals.
I remember getting my afro. I remember showing your Africanness and your blackness by wearing an afro. And I remember having beautiful dashikis.
And it looked like everywhere you went, somebody was trying to see who could be the blackest and whatever, I don't care where it was. Somebody was, a brother was always trying to show he was blacker than somebody else. We went through a heavy wave of African, Swahili, the language. Then we began to name our children, the African name.
We began to engage in this kind of self-indulgence culture. And as such, to the extent that your black parents inherited houses and lands, what they did is they liquidated those assets and they bought things that didn't really produce anything. It was just consumption. They consumed. And that's why you don't have your generational wealth. It's not because of slavery. It's not because of Jim Crow. It's because it was wasted and was squandered in the 1970s and the 80s. That's why. Two of the most cultural training of studying, of saving, of putting money up, of investing, then 2 or 3 generations from now, your children are not going to be set up for success. Your descendants are not going to be set up for success. It's to the extent that you pour into your children, that you invest in your children as a continuation of what your father and what your grandfather did. It's only to that extent that your children are going to be set up for success. When you reject what dad and granddad did, and you decide here and now to go the Marxist way, yes, your children and their children are going to be complaining about the system. And they're going to completely forget the fact that it was you who switched the trajectory, who switched it up. And now you're in a place where you don't know which way is up. This term generational